everyone, it's Stéphane Compin from Luxembourg podcast, and we are live today with episode 8, and I'm joined by Simône van Schouwenburg, who is an expat and arrived in Luxembourg several years ago. She's working at the BCEE Spuerkess bank as head of expat services. So Simône, I really appreciate that you accepted the invitation to be my guest on the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Of course. So good morning, Stéphane. Thank you already very much to have invited me for your podcast. I really like what you're doing.
Thank you.
So that was also one of the reasons that I'm honored to be part of your podcast. So you want me to explain a little bit?
Your background, where you are coming from, how you ended up in Luxembourg.
Okay, well, let's make a long story short. So actually, originally I'm from Holland, and I did my studies in Holland. After my studies, actually, I left for the United States, where I lived for a while, for about 2 years. And from the States, I moved up to London. And London, I think I worked there for about 3 years. And during that time in London, I met my future husband, who was actually, and you're gonna laugh, guess what he was? He was French. So he was living in London for already a few years, and I think a lot of French, after a moment, all these English people, that's enough. And he wanted to go back to his home country. So he was from Paris. So as a Dutch person, having talked 5 years English, I said, this is going to be a tough one, you know, even though you learned French in school. But I said, okay, well, why not? And so we left London and I joined him in Paris. Actually, from the work what I was doing in London, I had a transfer. And actually the director of my company introduced me in Paris in the same company. And so, of course, my French wasn't that good. And actually, I was working as responsible of a reception of a 5-star hotel in London. And when I arrived in Paris, you know, when you're a little bit pushed by your director, maybe, I arrived there in this huge hotel. It has nothing to do with what I was used to. It was like a huge factory, too much for me. And you can imagine when I arrived, they said, this one came through the director of London. Let's see. So good morning. How are you? Nice to meet you. Tell me what am I gonna do? And then he took me to a corridor, and he opened the door, and there were people sitting, and he said, well, this is where you're gonna start. It was at the switchboard, at the telephone service. So I said, I'm not sure this is going to work because my French is not that good. So anyway, so that was a big lesson when I started off in Paris like that. I think I stayed 6 months just to learn my French, and I moved on to the next job.
How did you manage with your French colleagues? Was it difficult, or most of them were speaking English, or how did it go?
Well, at that time, seriously, so this goes way back, not many French people were very, very easy with their English, which kind of give me an advantage as well, because since there were a lot of international people over there coming to the hotel where I was working, so that was interesting. But the integration in France, of course, I was introduced in really the French environment straight away, since my to-be husband at that time was French. So that was kind of an easy way, but as you said, going to work, that was kind of tough because you really had to get yourself accepted, and it was French, and no other language. But that also makes you learn quicker.
Yeah, you don't have any choice. You have to learn the language fast in able to be integrated in the new country.
Yeah, exactly. But that was a funny time. And then from actually Paris on, we moved to the south of France. In the meantime, I had 2 kids, and from the south of France, actually, after a little while, we moved up to Luxembourg. So that's how we arrived in Luxembourg. It was rather my husband at that time that had found work there. So it's always moving for work. Actually, I've always been moving for work everywhere.
Oh,
And I think moving house, I think this is going to be the 25th time that I'm moving house. So I guess it's not bad. You get used to
so
it.
you are used to it, and you know how you know the feeling of changing location is and integrating into new country. If I can come back to the beginning of your working life, so you went to the US. What was the purpose of going to the US, to study or to work?
Yeah, I studied there, and it was especially also for because of my English. That was really at the time a good move to do. And then in London, I started to work in the hotel business. Actually, I was head of the reception. So I've always worked my whole life in guest relations. Afterwards, I was guest relation manager in a big 5-star hotel. I loved that job. So which kind of also why it ended up doing what I'm doing today, I guess.
And so you were working in a hotel in Paris, and you said after 6 months you decided to move on. Did you stay in the same industry, or did you do something else?
Actually, I had a break with my kids.
Yeah.
So I followed my husband to the south of France because we said, well, this is the time,
Yeah.
to get out of Paris. And I thought about the education of my kids. I thought, well, if we have to make the move, let's go there. So
Yeah.
I had taken, you could take, you can still do it. You take some leave for your parental leave. Yeah. But after a while, of course, I mean, I wanted to get back to work again. So, and that is actually where I started to work in Luxembourg, because we ended up just over the border on the French side.
Yeah.
Why? Because my son was 10 and he had moved schools already 5 times.
Yeah. So
I thought,
not another change in another system. So it was the right move to. It's one of the reasons we also decided to live across the border and because of our kids, put them into the French system. So yeah, it's interesting how a number of people, whether Belgium or French or German, decide to work in Luxembourg and live across the border because of their kids.
Yeah, but I think I don't regret it, even though after a while I was sometimes saying maybe we should have started in Luxembourg straight away. But I think I don't regret that we've done that move. But of course, I was just waiting for the day that my kids were finished school. Because my life was in Luxembourg. I was working in Luxembourg for so many times. So actually go back first to my how come I went to Luxembourg and what did I in Luxembourg? So of course, after parental leave, you have to get back into everything again. And actually, I started off to work for the European Commission in the Information Society. And that was really a nice experience because I was actually financial gestioner, which means that you're taking care of all the projects that are financed by the European Commission, according, of course, to in which department you're working. This was Information Society. And you're taking care of all the financial implementation. And then you have to see if they use their budget correctly. It was really, really interesting. And also, I think that is a little bit part of Luxembourg as well, the European community.
Yeah.
I really realized that many people might be a little bit skeptic over that, but I think there are a lot of good things happening. At that time, I'm talking about the year 2000. We were already working on, the recognition with your eye, for instance, to open the door. So I think it was a really, really interesting period.
And I suppose that your language skills, speaking Dutch, French, and English, was a plus in terms of being hired by the European Commission.
Yes, definitely. Especially my Dutch as well, because after the French time, I didn't use my Dutch very often, but when I arrived here in Luxembourg, I loved it because there were a lot of Dutch people around, and that's really, really nice.
And how did you adapt it to the life in Luxembourg, and how did you get along, with this international environment? I suppose that having traveled quite a lot, it was an interesting new life compared to moving from Paris to the south of France and then to the east of France.
Oh yes, definitely. But the only thing before I tell you what was my experience when I really integrated in Luxembourg, because there's a moment I said when my kids were finished school, there was just one thing: I wanted to move to Luxembourg. So I thought that was my aim.
Yeah.
And I can still remember. So I had been going back and forwards over the border like many people do for years and years, and I still remember my first experience. So in the morning, so I taken an apartment in Luxembourg. In the morning, I got into my car. I sat in my seat and I just pushed the gas, and I was already there at work. It was amazing. If I still tell you the story, I have this chair de poule. Yeah. I'm not sure how you say it anymore, but amazing feeling because you didn't hear 3 times France Info, for instance. You didn't have time to wake up. Amazing experience.
Yeah, because for the people that are listening, you have a lot of cross-border crossing, the border of France, Germany, and Belgium to go to work in Luxembourg, and it's quite busy in the morning. A lot of traffic jams, even if. For example, the first town, Thionville, across the border is 30 kilometers. You can take sometimes 1 hour in the morning to go to work. So yeah, I can imagine it makes a difference when you move from France to Luxembourg, and to be able to go to work in 10 minutes or 15 minutes instead of 1 hour.
I think there is a quality of life. If people ask me now what should they do, according, of course, to the age of the children, according to each situation, I often say that it's nice to start off in Luxembourg.
Yeah, and especially if people have an international background, I think if they want to have the same environment, it's much better to move directly to Luxembourg, because it's less the case if you go across the border.
Exactly, but also it's very amazing when you arrive here in Luxembourg, because you cannot be lost. You cannot be lost. Whatever country you're coming from, you're not going to be lost, because there's so many other nationalities and everybody is in the same boat. Yeah. You all start off somewhere, and a lot of people want to help you because they know what you struggled through, and that you have to get all this information. So yeah, I think it's interesting to see how people help each other when you arrive in Luxembourg. But if you're talking about help, I think you, for instance, I think with Lux Relo, you're doing a really good job, because at that time when I arrived in Luxembourg, the relocation offices were not really present. They were, but you needed to know about it. If you didn't arrive in a company where you had help and the HR was saying, hey, somebody can help you with everything. But at that time, it didn't work like that. So that was very different. I think it's much more easier today.
Yeah, I think it's something that existed in Anglo-Saxon countries, but didn't really exist in Luxembourg. And it's true that the market being so tense, and people are being asked to be ready to work from day one, and they don't have time to focus on looking for a home and so on. And to be assisted is something that is sometimes important, especially if you don't know the language and in a tense housing market.
I think it's very important, but also people need to know about it. But nowadays, I think people know more about how to get help. And I think also what I really appreciate in Luxembourg is that we all work together to make the arrival as comfortable as possible for the person. And I think that's really something very particular in Luxembourg, which I did not found in other countries.
I think it's because it's I mean, you might say, yeah, London is a bit like that, maybe New York, but Luxembourg being small, it's maybe much easier to be able to meet different nationalities, to exchange with different people, which is maybe a bit more difficult in bigger countries.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think one of the things in Luxembourg is you have everything here. Okay, if you're coming from a big city, I totally agree that if you come from New York or you come from Paris, you want maybe a little bit more excitement. But on the other, yeah.
But looking at the actual COVID situation, I mean, it's no use to be living in New York or London if you cannot even go to cinemas, to shows, theaters. Well, it's people are stuck in nice apartments in those cities, but they don't even have gardens to enjoy.
That's true. That's so we're a little bit spoiled. But yeah. I also think this. I always say to these people, okay, if you want a little bit more excitement, even though there are a lot of things ongoing, you can take easily the train and go to Paris, or you can take the plane anywhere. I think we're very central, and that is also one of the reasons that you have a lot of different nationalities living in Europe, because it's easy.
Exactly, and I think it's also why so many international companies are coming to Luxembourg, because it's very central, and you have an educated, multicultural, multilingual workforce, and it makes everything much easier for them to be able, after that, to expand in Europe.
True. Yeah. True.
Can you tell us a little bit about when you relocated, the several times? What were, some of the challenges when you moved, and how you overcame it? Because being, Dutch, moving to France, where it's not very international, and then moving to the eastern part of France, even if you worked in Luxembourg, how did it go?
Well, as I said, at that moment, you did not have many people that could help you. So most of the time, you had to struggle yourself to do everything on your own. Even though there's a moving company, but most of the things you struggle to do on your own, and that's why I'm saying nowadays we're much better organized for that. So it was a struggle. To be honest, it was always a struggle, and integration for me was always very easy because I've been traveling a lot and I've been living in a lot of countries. But still, you have to get used. Every country works a little bit differently, and you need to find out, and it takes time to settle down.
Yeah, and the thing is that when you are moving abroad, you have an expat community, so you have people that can welcome you. When you move like you did from France to France, it's a bit harder, and you have to do the first step, and you have to go to meet people, and it's the only way to integrate, because if you wait for the people to invite you or welcome you, most of the time it won't happen. You'll stay alone, and you really need to make the effort to go and see the people.
Yeah, I'll tell you a little story when I arrived in the south of France. Because France is a big country. So yeah, you might be living in Paris, but if you're moving to the south of France, it might not be quite the same.
No.
And I can confirm that it wasn't quite the same, because I still remember that one day I had invited some people that I met over to come for a drink to the house. So I said, well, come around 8 o'clock and then we'll have a drink and we'll see, we might have a little bite to eat. And so I prepared everything, how in Holland we prepare a lot of things to have a drink, with little things to eat. And so I was all ready. So 8 o'clock arrived. I said, okay, well, in the south of France, I know very well that people, 8 o'clock might be 8 8:15, 8:30, and then at 8:30 I started to wonder, maybe my French wasn't good enough. Did they really understand? That I was organizing a drink at home. And then 9 o'clock, still nobody. And then I said, well, let's start calling and see what's going on. So I think finally at 9:30, I finally got hold of somebody. Oh yes, well, we're having a drink in somebody's place, but no, we're coming. And they came at 10 o'clock. You see, so that is particular. That is really amazing, and you have to get used to that. Those are really funny things. If you arrive, go ahead.
No, it's true that talking about France, if you go in the eastern part of France, people are more on time. If you're going into the south, then people are a bit more relaxed in terms of timing, which can be really challenging for people from Nordic countries to go and work there because, when, like you said, if you said an appointment at 8 o'clock, well, they might arrive at 8:30, and yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah, but that's what makes it interesting as well, because you also maybe understand the way people function, and I think it's important. It gives you a lot of ideas how you maybe can accept certain things or maybe do things differently, because finally, okay, these people have always done it like that, so you get used to that.
Yeah, and for you, it was, you adapted well. And I think that, ending up in Luxembourg, having, moved in different countries and learned a new language is the perfect, arrival where you are now in an international environment and working with expat, which is, the final point of your journey in arriving in Luxembourg.
Yeah, but you're saying you're talking about languages. When I arrived in Luxembourg, I said, "Wow, this is great. They have their own language. It would be great to learn Luxembourgish, and for me as well, because I'm Dutch. I speak German. So for me, this language should be easy, which means I understand what they're saying, but understanding and being able to speak it's very, very difficult, because finally, in your day-to-day work, you don't really use a lot of Luxembourgish. You speak rather French or maybe English. That's a little bit the language that you use in the companies. Yeah. And then Luxembourgish, where do you use it? If you don't meet straight away Luxembourgish people, and even so, because they switch over very easily to French as well, because for them they have the Luxembourgish, the French, and the German. For them, it's the same language actually. So yeah, I think that's the most difficult part. You would like to integrate completely, but learning the language is still tough.
Yeah, I think it's the difficulty in Luxembourg concerning the language is that compared to other countries, if you're going to Spain or Italy, if you want to go around and be able to communicate with people, you need to learn the local language. But in Luxembourg, the people speaking so many languages, and nowadays English, even in shops or bars, is commonly used, which means that you don't have to do any effort. You can, stay 4 years, 5 years in Luxembourg without, speaking French, German, or Luxembourgish, which I think is a pity. And it's, I mean, you and me, we know that most of the time during our day, as we are working with expats, our communication language is English. So it's, like you said, it's not every day that you are able to speak Luxembourgish.
No, that's true. But but I think we still, as you said, it's nice to learn the Luxembourgish language. If you have the occasion to do it, I think you should. Yeah. I'm working on it, but you see, after so many years, I'm still not fluently with my Luxembourgish. But it will come. I think it's a nice way also to honor the country.
Yeah, I totally agree. What you wish you had known when you started to work or to live in Luxembourg? Is anything particular?
Well, as I said, I mean, I think your service had been more than welcome. I wish I wouldn't have known that there are people taking care of everything actually when you arrive, and they're going to help you around, because it takes you so much effort and time to find out where you have to go and register, who's going to be able to help you finding your residence. How does it work? Because in Luxembourg, it's a country. It might be very different than in other countries where you lived before. So those are little things that might have been really helpful for me to have somebody like you and explaining me how everything works. That is really something I regret, that I didn't take advantage of that at the time.
Even if it can be easier than in other countries, because on the government websites, it's a lot of the pages and the explanations are in English or in 3 languages, French, German, and English, which is much easier than in other countries. And of course, when you go to see government people going to register at the town hall, people in front of you speak 4 or 5 languages, which would never happen in another country.
Exactly.
So you think it could be a bit easier than in other countries?
Definitely, definitely.
So coming back to your working life in Luxembourg, so you work for the European Commission. How did you ended up in the banking sector?
Because somewhere, I mean, this work I liked. It was an international environment once again. But yeah, I was doing a job that I really enjoyed. But there was a moment I said, well, I still want to do something else. Even though I very appreciated all the people that I worked with. But in this commission, there's a special way of working, and I said, well, let me try. I've always worked in the private sector. I might want to go back to the private sector, and there I ended up in a bank, a Dutch bank, actually, quite funny enough. It's called Back to Your Roots. And so there, I started to take care of the portfolios for clients. It was a very interesting period. And suddenly, is it called destiny? I don't know. We realized that there were so many international people arriving to Luxembourg. And maybe we could do a little bit things different for these people arriving, because especially I had struggled going from all the countries. Yeah. And in concerning your bank account as well, a lot of people think, oh, you don't need a bank account because we're in Europe maybe. And I've lived over the border, why should I open a bank account in Luxembourg? But finally you realize that you do need a bank account. And so at that moment I thought it would be interesting to set up a service completely dedicated to new arrivals in Luxembourg. So I started that service, and I think it was a big success. I think people really appreciated also being able to open an account, for instance, before you arrive in Luxembourg. So that is one of the main things. And
then you moved to Spuerkess, so it's a local bank. How do you say that? Yeah, local. It's a pure Luxembourgish bank where you open an expat desk. Can you explain about your role and what kind of services you offer for expats?
Yeah, actually, so who would ever thought for a Dutch person to leave a Dutch bank? But I did it, which means I arrived in the Luxembourgish state bank, which is very, very Luxembourgish. But finally, I discovered that they have very nice traditions in Luxembourg, and the challenge for me is to set up the expat service within the Luxembourgish bank. So I think that's for them also. I think it's a very good sign to say, okay, Luxembourg, the Luxembourgish people say now as well, there's so many people arriving in Luxembourg. It would be good to have a service for them in able to make them feel welcome and make things more smoother in Luxembourg.
Yeah.
So that is my challenge today. And funny enough, I think actually my whole life I've been working with international people, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's so interesting and so rich.
Yeah.
And you learn a lot of things from people as well. So always service-minded, orientated towards the service.
Maybe you can explain a bit about, the way you are able to help expats with their opening their bank account, because a lot of people, they arrive in a new country. They might need, to be able to pay their first month's rent and have a bank guarantee. But to be able to do that, often they need to be registered in the country. And I think in the past it was the case. You needed to be registered before being able to open a bank account. But to be registered, you needed to find an apartment, and to book the apartment, you needed to rent to pay the rent and the bank guarantee, which was a bit of a nightmare. Can you explain a bit how you managed to overcome this situation and are being able to help the expats prior to their arrival in Luxembourg?
Yeah, because like you say, it's a struggle. It's like a vicious circle. Because if you don't have a bank account, you cannot rent the apartment to be able to put the bank guarantee in place, and you might not be able to get your internet contract and your mobile phone. So yeah, that's why we said we're all related to each other. So what is really the particularity of the service, of the expat service, is helping people, even though they are not in the country yet, helping people already to set up their bank account, opening their bank account, enable for them also to already transfer the amount corresponding to the deposits if they're going to rent housing. Yeah. But normally it always corresponds to 3 months down deposit and 1 month's rent and 1 month's agency fees.
Exactly.
So all that we can already do, even though we haven't met you in person yet, which I think is really, really great to do. Of course, there's a moment we need to meet you to make sure it's you. Yeah, and to validate all the paperwork.
And sign some paperwork, yes.
Exactly. And also on the other side, which is interesting, is that we have established partnerships with finally everything that you could need when you arrive in Luxembourg. But that's where all our services join each other as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think when you're onboarding a new client, you might be needing a bank. You might need other services as well, looking for housing or insurance. But we all know that somewhere, we're all connected to each other. And our aim is to help the client arriving smoothly in Luxembourg. So these are things we can offer as well. It's a little bit like a one-stop shop, actually. I'm trying to make things easy.
Yeah, and I think it's important because when people arrive, they have so many things to think about, and to be able to nowadays you cannot just arrive with a bag full of money. You need to open a bank account to be able to start your life in the new country, and the fact that banks like yours or others on the market are able to provide such a service is really important. People are feel welcome, and it makes the rest of the journey much easier if they've already arranged for the bank account to be open and up and running.
Yeah. And also, I think what I'm putting in place as well is now during the COVID, it's a little bit different, but all that was already arranged. For instance, we as a bank, we organize also events that we invite all the expat people coming over, and then we do sessions on maybe tax deductible products or succession planning, because those are also things we're talking about people, new arrivals. But we have a lot of expats living here in Luxembourg, have been there already about 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Did you ever think about succession planning, for instance?
Yeah, you're
Did
right.
you ever think that, for instance, you come over with husband and wife, and you got married in Brazil or you got married in Spain, and you're coming over in Luxembourg? You've been living for a while here. What happens? Does your wedding contract is really applicable here in Luxembourg? So those are already also things that you really have to think about. Normally, a lot of people say, oh, I'm come to Luxembourg, I'll stay 2-3 years. And finally, we see, I don't know exactly the percentages, but I think over half of the people arriving in Luxembourg will finish staying in Luxembourg.
Yeah.
So finally, you should ask yourself your question as well. Hey, am I still in order the day that something arrives to me? What should I do? Or for instance, also pension planning is something that is really interesting to know about. So those are little bits, those are things that add to the expat service from our bank, informing people about all the aspects that you might not think about when you arrived already for a while in Luxembourg.
And having been an expat, I think it makes things easier for you to understand the people and how they feel when they arrive in a new country. You know, the stress, the anxiety, the excitement, and maybe you can relate to them, which makes the way you welcome them a bit different than somebody who wasn't an expat maybe.
Yes, especially because I've been working for my whole life with international clients. So I've met a lot of different nationalities. And so, a little bit, each nationality has also their way of reacting.
Yeah.
People maybe from one country take things differently than from another country. So that's nice to know. Also, for me, it's important to know where people come from, because then I can already feel, okay, well, this person is really going to be worried about that. I'm going to take care of it, and telling them how they should do. So that's I think every nationality reacts differently, and that for me, my experience from everywhere I've been, I think helps me a lot today, and I enjoy it. I love it.
Yeah, you're right, because the reputation of the Dutch, for example, is that they are very direct. When they have to say things, they go directly to the point, which can surprise some people, maybe more in the south of Europe. So to understand how the people react to different situations can help, to overcome any anxiety or question they might have when they move to a new country.
Yeah, also especially when people have not moved a lot around in their lives, it's a big thing to move, huh?
Yeah.
Especially, it's one thing moving if you're on your own, but if you're a family, if you have children, it's a big thing to move. There are a lot of things you need to think about, and it might be a very stressful period. Why? Also because you're starting a new job. Because the main reason that you arrive in Luxembourg most of the time is you come here because you found a job. So, which means that you find a job, you have to move, you have to enroll your kids in school. The second person, and which I just want to make a little remark, is we see more and more women finding a job and the men following the woman. It's because that's new, huh?
Yeah, I confirm. We have. Lately, I didn't check the percentage, but we have more and more women moving to Luxembourg, and it's the husband following. So, which is, in terms of equality, is great.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see that, because that's something that we were not used to. But also, I think now, if you look at when you're having children and you can take a parental leave as a husband, I think that's wonderful. So that also changes everything. I think that's little by little, the world is opening up for that. Yeah, funny to see that the last 2 years, husbands are following wives.
Well, coming back to the difficulty of as to relocate to a new country, and especially if it's the first time, what I've noticed is that if the person working has issues with his, with relocating, like, difficulties with finding a house or administrative issues, the person will not be able to focus on his job, and it will have an impact on his productivity, his implication in his new job. And I've seen it in the past, managers saying, oh, I mean, this new hire is, not motivated, he's not concentrating on his task and so on. And it was not because he was not good. It's just because he was worried about, things at home. The wife or the husband not being settled well and having issues with school and so on. So it's something that is really important to think about before relocating. Is the whole implication of moving a family.
Yes, definitely, because that's a worrying factor, and so that's our job to make things smooth. Also, I think if I think bank-wise, a lot of times also once I've been onboarding the people arriving in Luxembourg, and from the first time that I am in contact, and once we have everything and able to open the account, there have been a lot of exchanges and a lot of stories, maybe phone calls, emails. And once I'm comfortable with what we have, and I put them in contact with their future relationship manager, a lot of times I hear from my colleagues that this relation is very important, because it's actually the first image of a bank relation that we give in Luxembourg. And I think that's also important, that we choose the right people to put these people in contact with them, because a lot of times if we can already have somebody that speaks maybe the same language, helps a lot. And it's less stressful to be able to speak in your own language. So those are tiny little things that we try to pay attention of as well. And so this relation stays later on. And these people,
I think it also might reassure them the fact that you are an expat, and for them, they can really think that, you understand them, you've been there. So it might make everything much easier than, if you were not an expat before.
Yeah, now also, now I'm just reminding myself of that. So coming from different countries, of course, you have different products that you might use to, or different activities that you might use to. So that was also an experience, actually, because I think nowadays products from your own country you can find easily in Luxembourg. But 10 years or 15 years, it was not the case. So those things are actually, you're far away from your country, but you're not far away from your traditional way of cooking, maybe, because you can find the ingredients here. But sports-wise, I was wondering about that now, and I wanted to tell you that. So there was one thing I did not find when I arrived in Luxembourg. It exists today. That's why I said a lot of things have changed. But in Holland, I was a big hockey player. I loved it, field hockey. So field hockey is a big sport in Holland. And I moved to the States. Field hockey wasn't really a good sport to do there. It hardly existed. Then I moved to London, and actually in London, yes, they did do field hockey. And they're very good at it. But the only thing is the job that I was doing took me a lot of times. I was living in the center of London, and going to this hockey club was always outside of London. So it was difficult. And then when I arrived to France, so hockey, I mean, they look at you twice and they don't know what you're talking about, especially field hockey. So I said, oh, okay, we'll forget about this sport. And then I arrived in Luxembourg, and at that time they didn't play field hockey, and somebody took the initiative to start the hockey club here in Luxembourg. So that's really nice as well. I've been going there and having a little look, but I haven't really played anymore. So, but the hockey club here in Luxembourg exists as well now, and it's a mixed club, which is really nice. So finally, is there really something that you cannot find in Luxembourg? What you were doing in the country where you're coming from? I don't know. Have you heard of something?
No, I mean, yes, I mean, most of the sports you can, practice. Of course, if you want to ski, you can do it in Luxembourg, but during the winter, you can go, in the Vosges, which is not too far away, even if it's not, very high. You still have snow, except this year, which was not terrible. So yeah, I mean, and you have Belgium, which is, I think going to the sea, it's like 3 hours drive, and you are, on the Belgium coast. So yeah, Luxembourg is quite well located.
Yeah, I think it's no. I have nothing to say. I think we're very well organized here, and very rich and interesting country culture-wise, and still a stable economy. So I think we're very good living in Luxembourg.
Yeah, so you think that people should move to Luxembourg? Why they should move to Luxembourg? Do you have an advice on that? Like you said, a lot of people come for only a 2-3 years assignment and then they stay forever.
Yes, true. And that's funny because I always laugh when I meet people when they're just arriving. I'm going to speak to you in 5 years' time, and I'm sure you're still going to be here. And they always laugh. And it's funny because afterwards I do meet them in events that we organize. And there are people coming to me, oh, Simone, you told me that I wasn't going to be there, but I'm still here. I love Luxembourg. So yeah, why should people come over? Because I think already we are very...
Why are they staying? Why do you think they are, a lot of people think that Luxembourg is small and not interesting, but they are staying, so there is a reason. Why do you think they are staying?
Because it's already very international, which means that you can find easily people from your own country, but from all other countries. So you can find easily people that went through the same thing or coming from the same places as you do. I think it's a very safe country. We're still a very, very safe country, and I think we're classified in one of the safest countries, or definitely one of the. I think we're in the top 10 safest cities, Luxembourg City. So I think that's also something that we might want to think about. Integration goes smoothly.
Yeah.
No, it's a small country. But you have the city, and 5 minutes later you can be in the countryside. There's everything for everybody, I would say. Culture-wise, there has been a lot of development as well. No, I think there's no excuse. Serious. Why should you not stay? But also, of course, it depends of the age you are. I mean, some families might stay 5 years and move on. You see that as well. According to the age, if you're maybe 25, 35, you might meet your second half.
Yeah, and some people, youngsters want to move as well. So it might, they might, go in different countries, and then when they are married with kids, come back to Luxembourg or move to Luxembourg because it's a safe place to raise kids, and it's a nice environment to raise a family. So yeah, I think it's...
Yeah, also, where do you know a country where kids go to school and they learn 3 languages?
Not a lot, no.
Yes, I mean, that's amazing. And they learn Luxembourgish first, and then they swap into German, and then they have French. I think that's wonderful. Or even for families that have their kids in English-speaking schools, there are a lot of international schools as well. So I think there's much choice.
Yeah, totally agree. So you were talking about hockey, field hockey. What is a passion of yours that you were able to pursue in Luxembourg, or did you find something else when you moved to Luxembourg that you were able to do outside of work?
Oh, many things. Well, I was in Holland. I've always done a lot of sports. So field hockey was my passion. Okay, but when I moved to all these different countries, forget about field hockey. So I was playing tennis as well a lot. So tennis you can play anywhere. So that's for definitely I play tennis again. Of course, biking. As a Dutch person, for me, I mean, biking. I grew up with a bike. I used to bike to school 50 or 17 kilometers every day. If it was snowing or raining or sunny, you always go by bike. I remember when it was cold in the morning, you used to go on your bike to school, and you got out of the shower and with your wet hair, and you arrived at school. You had these rastas, because everything was frozen. So yeah, biking. I mean, I'm a tough one. I'm a tough cookie for biking. But biking in Holland, of course, now you're going to say no mountains, so that's not biking. It's a little bit true. So yes, I started to do biking since I arrived in Luxembourg. It's more hilly, so it's more like VTT biking, more sportive. So yeah, I really enjoy that as well. Beautiful places to discover. I think there's about
you have a lot of places to go when you are biking in Luxembourg. You can do, mountain biking in the countryside, and then you have, a specific paths to go in the north. You can go to the Moselle Valley as well. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, yeah, especially okay, certain areas are quite hilly. For the moment, I do not have an electric bike yet. I was hesitating during the COVID, should I or should I not? But for the moment, I stay sportive.
Yeah.
But Luxembourg counts 600 kilometers of bike rides. Did you know that?
It's amazing. I didn't know. Yeah. Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So
yeah, biking is my passion for today.
Great. Lastly, what are your maybe 2-3 best tips or advice for people relocating to Luxembourg or who wish to move to Luxembourg? What should things that could help them to move?
Yeah, so especially, I mean, don't try to do everything yourself anymore today. That has absolutely no sense. I think it's better to contact somebody who's gonna concentrate on your whole arrival, and you concentrate on your job. So those are easy things today that we can do, and I really recommend that people contact relocation offices. And that they take care of everything, because I think it's a lot of hassle. Even though you want to try to do it on your own, there are little things that you might not know about. And I think, yeah, my advice for people is contact all the professional people in Luxembourg, and we're all happy to help them onboarding. Don't hassle, and don't go and find yourself looking how you have to do it. This is really something I struggled always with, and if I had to do it over today, I would not think 1 second. I would go for it straight away for the service. So that's one thing I really like to advise to people.
And what when newcomers arriving in Luxembourg, what if outside of work, what should they do to be better integrated in the country?
Well, I think where we're talking about sports, I think that is always a very nice way of getting integrated in a town where you're gonna be living.
Yeah, I agree.
Local sports club, I think that's a really nice thing. But even special, you have also, for instance, you have chambers. So Chamber of Commerce. Every country has a Chamber of Commerce present in Luxembourg. And that is also a nice way not to really forget completely about your country, and meet people from your own country that went through the same thing, but still living in Luxembourg and doing a lot of things for the international community in Luxembourg. That's a nice way to integrate as well. I would recommend that.
Yeah, and I agree, because networking is very important in Luxembourg. It's the way you meet people and you do business as well. So I agree with you. I strongly advise our customers arriving in Luxembourg to join a women's club, a business club, or a chamber of commerce, to be able to because it's not, when you are talking about chambers of commerce, it's not, only for English people if it's the British Chamber, but it's for the international community. So it's a good way to meet, like-minded people and to get integrated much faster.
Exactly. But there's also, I think there's also, you were just saying, Stefan, that in Luxembourg, there are a lot of meetings and events ongoing. Yeah. That's something really particular in Luxembourg. Did you know that? Because networking is a big thing in Luxembourg. And you might go to a networking and you'll have maybe just next to you people from the government. And you can talk to them. They're very approachable, and that's something very particular. I mean, especially, I mean, I've lived in the States, or really you never see that. In London, I've never met that neither. In Paris, neither. No, it's really very particular, and that's what makes it so interesting as a little country, because you can just find yourself on the same table as one of the ministers, and just talking to them about, maybe transport problems that you have, and you can expose him your transport problem. And I think that's amazing. So that's interesting as well. Yeah, it doesn't exist elsewhere.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Now the difficulty is with the COVID is when are we going to be able to go back to networking and lunches and so on, and because all those big gatherings now are cancelled and won't start again for a few months. So yeah, I think I'm missing that, to be able to meet all those people that arrive in the past months, and to meet with the international community.
Yeah, I miss that as well, because we work with all these people, and we need that as well. I think that's one of our things, that how we function, meeting
as
people.
Human being.
Yes. So it's nice to do all these podcasts and Zooms, and they organize now as well, the after work drinks via all these applications. But it's still not the same for me. So I'm very curious to see how we're gonna get out of this period. There's gonna be a new normal. It's gonna be a different way of functioning. And but I think little by little, I think we'll get back. Maybe not at the same level that we were.
Yeah, smaller groups.
Yeah. So that might be also interesting, and a different way of approaching as well.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see.
Great. So we are coming to the end of the podcast. If our listeners want to connect with you, want to learn more about what you are doing, what is the best way to do that, and I will put the information in the notes of the podcast.
Okay, but I'm always available on LinkedIn, of course.
Okay.
They can always contact me. By email, even by telephone. I mean, I'm always happy to reply to questions concerning new arrivals. And so, yeah, I'm here. So do not hesitate to contact me. I will be happy to help you. And and I just wanted to add as well is actually I'm very, if I think about everything where I've been living. Today, I'm really proud to work in a Luxembourgish bank, actually. I think that's funny because I love this country. So for me, it's like, this might be my final stop.
Yeah, or giving back to the country that, welcomed you when you arrived.
Exactly, and also letting people know that even a Luxembourgish bank, we are happy to receive international people, and we're not only Luxembourgish. Now we're a Luxembourgish bank, but we're open to the international community, and that people don't really realize that. You see, because maybe are they afraid to go to a Luxembourgish bank? I don't know. I sometimes wonder, but there should not be. And there should definitely not be a barrier concerning the language. Maybe that's the reason people think that. So
Yeah,
that's
maybe.
a question you have to answer me.
Well, thanks for your time and for joining the podcast, Simone. It's very much appreciated. I really loved our discussion, and talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan, and have a really nice day. Thanks a lot.